talk about the beautiful business of milk today. Yeah, yeah. I got milk. Let's talk about milk. Oh yeah, baby, let's talk about the beautiful business of milk today.
This episode of Got Milk is sponsored by Shunya Agritech, the folks revolutionizing cattle nutrition with hydroponic green fodder. Visit their website at shunya.live for more details or download the Shunya app from Play Store or App Store.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Have you ever thought about how a simple glass of milk could be, well, life-changing for entire communities?
That's it, yeah.
Well, today we're going to find out. We're going deep into the world of dairying in India
Really?
to see how impactful it can be. We've got a recent study that really zoomed in
Oh, cool.
on rural farming households in Vaishali.
Okay.
That's a district in Bihar, India.
Right.
It looked at how much of an impact owning a few cows or buffaloes, can really have. And it's not even just about the milk itself, but kind of the ripple effects on their income, jobs,
Oh, wow.
even putting food on the table for the people who need it most.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty important. It's a fascinating case study, this one.
Yeah.
Because in this region, a huge chunk of the population
Yeah.
lives in these rural areas, right? Over 90%.
Right.
And their main gig is farming. So you can imagine
Yeah.
how crucial dairying is to their whole way of life.
Yeah, to the whole social and economic, fabric of the place. Yeah. Really see how it all works. This study focused on what they call milch animal holding households.
Okay.
We'll just call them MAHs.
MAH, okay.
They're the families that rely on cows or buffaloes for milk production.
Yeah.
But they didn't stop there. They also looked at the families who don't have dairy animals
Oh,
to
interesting.
really compare and contrast,
That's clever, yeah. The researchers called them non-MAHs. So that way it's clear who they're talking about. It helps to paint a clearer picture of the impact for those who do have dairy animals.
Right, exactly. And it's not a new thing,
Mm-hmm.
Dairying in India has been around for a long time.
Yeah, centuries, really. A cornerstone of their agriculture.
It's deeply rooted in their whole way of life. And when you think about it, over 60% of India's dairy farmers,
Wow.
which is 11 million people,
11 million, wow.
they're smallholders, marginal farmers, or even landless. Now, we should probably explain what those terms mean because people might not be familiar with them. What do we mean when we say marginal farmer?
Yeah, good point. In India, a marginal farmer is someone with a really, really tiny plot of land,
Okay.
often less than 1 hectare.
Wow. That's tiny.
That's barely enough to survive on.
Mm-hmm.
Smallholders have a bit more land,
Ah.
maybe up to 2 hectares.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about families that rely on just a couple of cows or buffaloes, not giant herds.
So for a lot of these families, their cows or buffaloes are their main source of income, really.
Yeah.
They're really putting, all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. And that makes the study's findings even more impactful.
Yeah, that.
So let's see how this plays out in Vaishali.
Okay.
It's in the Gangetic Plains of northern India.
Gotcha.
Really fertile land.
Yeah.
Long history of farming.
So it's a pretty typical picture of rural India then.
Yeah, it is, which is what makes these results
Right.
really, really interesting.
I see, yeah.
So let's get right to it. What did the study find about how dairying impacts the income and the jobs in Vaishali?
Okay, so the study found that dairying makes a really big difference,
Okay.
especially for those marginal farmers,
Right.
the ones with the smallest plots of land. They get around 21% of their total income
Wow.
just from dairying.
That's huge.
Think about that. For a family struggling to get by,
Yeah.
21% extra, that could change everything.
That's the difference between sending a kid to school or not,
Oh, yeah.
putting a decent meal on the table,
Exactly.
or even just having some savings in case of emergency.
Totally. What about the small farmers, though? The ones with a bit more land?
Yeah, what about them?
Did they see the same kind of impact?
Well, for them it was a bit lower. About 18% of their income was from dairying.
Okay, so still significant, but
Yeah, but it shows how vital those animals are,
Right, yeah.
especially for the families who are struggling the most.
makes sense.
So for those families that are right on the edge, those cows and buffaloes could be the difference between just getting by and actually having a chance to improve their lives.
Absolutely.
It seems like there's a pretty clear benefit then, right?
Yeah, so far.
Right.
But we have to remember the other families, the non-MAHs, right?
Yeah, right. The ones without the animals.
How are they doing financially?
Yeah, how do they compare?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. So each MAH family
Yeah.
was making more, generally
sure.
from their animals. But the non-MAH, on average,
Right.
actually had higher overall incomes.
Oh, really? Okay.
But there's a bit of a catch.
Oh, okay.
It shows something important about how income is spread out in Vaishali.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the catch?
Well, it turns out some of the non-MAH had really well-paying jobs
Oh, okay.
outside of farming, which skewed the average income higher for that whole group.
So a few people are earning a lot and making it look like
Exactly.
non-MAHs are doing better as a whole.
But it's not really the full picture.
Right.
The real insight comes when you look at how evenly the income is spread out. So among the MAH,
Okay.
the income was distributed much more fairly.
Oh.
It actually seems like dairying helps level the playing field a bit.
So not only is dairying giving these families income, but it's also creating a more equitable economic environment.
Yeah, precisely. It's pretty amazing to see how owning a few dairy animals can impact a whole community that way.
Yeah, and it really challenges that assumption that everyone without dairy animals is doing better.
Right, exactly.
It makes you wonder how else it impacts their well-being, especially those families that are just barely getting by. Is there more to it than just the money?
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about food security,
Okay.
which is all about having consistent access to nutritious and safe food.
Right.
The study looked at the energy available to different households.
So like their calorie intake.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
They weren't just measuring how much money people had, but whether they actually had enough to eat.
Right, that makes sense. So what did they find?
Well, they found a really powerful link between owning those dairy animals and, having enough food. Both those marginal and small MAHs, the ones with the cows and buffaloes, they had a much more stable access to food. Like when they looked at their calorie intake, it was much better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, they've got milk and milk products right there, consistent source of nutrition. It doesn't really matter what's happening with their crops or, whatever is going on in the markets.
Well,
it's like a built-in safety net against going hungry.
Exactly. It really shows how important dairying is, not just for the money, but for their well-being,
Yeah.
especially for those families that are most vulnerable to, food shortages and things like that.
Right. Now, the study mentioned something called the Gini concentration ratio,
Oh,
or GCR.
The GCR.
It sounds kind of technical.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us, and how does it fit into all of this?
Sure. Imagine you have a pie chart.
Okay. Pie chart.
And it represents all the income in Vaishali. The Gini concentration ratio, the GCR, it basically measures how big the slices of that pie are for different groups of people. So a higher GCR means the pie's sliced unevenly.
Right.
A few people are getting huge pieces.
Yeah.
Most people are getting tiny ones.
Gotcha.
A lower GCR means the pie is sliced more equally.
Okay.
Everyone's getting a fairer share.
So it's basically a way to measure income inequality then.
Exactly.
How big the gap is between, the rich and the poor.
Right.
So what does this GCR tell us about the role of dairying in Vaishali?
Well, what they found was when they removed dairy income from the equation,
Okay.
the GCR for both those marginal and small farmers, it went up.
So if those families didn't have that income from
Right.
their animals,
Yeah.
the gap between the rich and poor would be even bigger.
Exactly. Dairying's actually helping to balance things out a bit.
That's amazing. It's really keeping things a bit more fair.
Precisely. It's another important insight. It reinforces the idea that dairying isn't just about the economics.
Right.
It's a vital part of creating a more just and equal society for these communities.
Now, I'm sure people are wondering about the dairy animals themselves. What kinds of cows and buffaloes are we talking about here?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, we're talking about a huge industry in India.
It is massive.
So I'm guessing there's a lot of variety, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The study actually gives a detailed breakdown of all the different types of cattle in Vaishali.
Okay.
They've got crossbred, exotic female cows,
Okay.
indigenous cows,
Gotcha.
and female buffaloes.
Hmm.
Each one has its own, characteristics and milk production levels. It's really interesting.
So it's a pretty diverse picture of Indian dairying.
Very much so.
Let's get into the numbers for a sec. What can you tell us about the milk production in Vaishali? How much milk are we talking about here?
Okay, get ready for this, because Vaishali produces a whopping 458,961 liters of milk every single day.
Whoa. That's a lot of milk. I mean, that's got to be enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool.
Oh, easily.
Maybe even several.
Probably. It really puts it into perspective, how much one district contributes to India's milk production overall.
It's incredible. And where's all that milk coming from?
Well, it comes from a variety of sources. You've got the crossbred cows,
Okay.
which are known for producing a lot of milk.
Yeah?
They produce 90,653 liters daily.
Those are the real high performers.
They are.
What about the indigenous cows, though?
Yeah?
I'm guessing they're not as productive.
Not quite. No.
But they still play a big role.
Oh, absolutely. They're really well adapted to the climate there,
Yeah.
And they produce a decent amount, like 86,075 liters every day.
Okay.
And then you've got the buffaloes, the heavy hitters of milk production.
Okay. How much are those guys producing?
A massive 282,233 liters per day.
Whoa. That's incredible.
They really are the backbone of Vaishali's dairy industry.
Wow. It's amazing how they've figured out how to use all the different types of cattle to, make the most of their milk production.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So what happens to all that milk? They can't be drinking all of it themselves, right?
Of course not. Some of it is consumed locally. They actually have more than a cup of milk available per person every day, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But they still have a huge surplus.
Oh, wow. How much extra are we talking?
Something like 220,905 liters every day.
That's a ton of milk. Where does it all go?
Well, some of it is probably sold to nearby districts.
Oh, okay.
Helps with regional food security.
Makes sense.
And then another chunk is probably processed into all sorts of dairy products.
Hmm.
Yogurt, cheese, ghee,
Right.
sweets.
Right.
It creates a whole local economy.
It's amazing to think that milk from these small farms could end up all over India.
Yeah.
Maybe even in other countries.
It's possible.
It just shows you the ripple effects of this industry.
And absolutely.
Not just on individual families, but on the entire region.
It really highlights the potential for growth in the dairy sector, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if they invest in better infrastructure technology, training for these farmers, you could see even bigger benefits for the communities and the whole country's economy.
That's amazing. But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
I want to go back to something we talked about earlier.
Okay.
The role of women in all of this. We know women do a lot of the work in agriculture,
Right.
and I'm guessing that's especially true in dairying. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a great point. This specific study didn't go too deep into the whole gender dynamics thing.
Okay.
But we know from other research that women are essential to India's dairy industry. They're often the ones taking care of the animals every day,
Right.
milking them, processing the milk, even managing the money from it all.
So when we're talking about the economic impact,
Yeah.
we can't forget that it's often the women who are doing the actual work.
Exactly, both literally and figuratively. And it's not just the labor either.
Oh, okay.
Women often have a really deep knowledge of animal care,
Right.
passed down for generations.
Right.
And they're really good at making the most of what they have.
They're the unsung heroes then.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder what would happen if they had even more support,
Yeah.
more training, resources, decision-making power.
It seems like there's a lot of untapped potential there.
Absolutely. Empowering women in the dairy sector. It's not just about fairness.
Yeah.
It's about, unlocking this huge source of ingenuity and resilience that could really benefit everybody.
Totally. And it just goes to show that dairying is about way more than just milk production.
It really is.
It's about livelihoods, families, gender dynamics, and ultimately building a more sustainable and equitable future for rural India.
Well said. And that brings up a really important question. How do we make sure dairying continues to be successful?
Yeah.
Not just economically, but also environmentally. The study talks about how important it is to support dairying as a good way for these communities to make a living.
Right.
But how do we do that in a way that's sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's great to talk about increasing milk production and supporting farmers. But what about the impact on the environment? If you intensify dairying too much, it can put a strain on everything.
Yeah.
Water, land, the production of feed for the animals.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance?
It seems like you need a more holistic approach,
Right.
something that helps both the farmers and the environment.
Yeah.
How do we make sure dairying in India isn't just about how much milk they make,
Right.
but that it's done well and sustainably too.
That's the key, isn't it? It's going to take, a strategy that addresses everything. Think about a system where farmers have better access to financing training programs, where they prioritize taking good care of the animals,
Right.
and where sustainable farming is just the norm.
So it's about giving these farmers the knowledge and the resources to like really thrive,
Right.
even as the world is changing around them.
Yeah.
But who's responsible for making that happen? Is it the government, companies, the farmers themselves?
It's going to take all of them
Yeah.
working together.
Yeah.
Government agencies, research institutions, even private companies, they all need to work together to create a system that supports, sustainable dairying.
Okay.
And that gives those farmers the information they need to make good choices.
Can you give us some examples of what that would look like in practice?
Sure. Think about programs that help farmers get access to better breeds of cattle,
Okay.
ones that are tougher, more resistant to diseases,
Right.
and produce more milk. Or, mobile vet clinics.
Yeah.
They can travel to these remote villages to provide health care to the animals.
That's a great idea.
Right.
What about the milk itself?
Yeah.
Is there a way to improve how they handle it and process it?
Oh, absolutely.
So they reduce waste and have better quality products.
Yeah. Training the farmers on the best ways to collect the milk,
Okay.
store it,
Right.
transport it.
Yeah.
That can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And if they invest in those small-scale processing plants in those rural areas,
Yeah.
that can help the farmers make more money from their milk.
Right. Because they can turn it into yogurt, cheese, all these things that they can sell at higher prices.
It sounds like there are so many different ways they could create a better, more sustainable dairy system. What about getting those products to market?
Right.
It doesn't matter how much milk they make if they can't sell it, right?
Exactly. They need those reliable supply chains
Okay.
that connect those small dairy farmers to the bigger markets, whether that's through, co-ops,
Right.
private buyers,
Yeah.
or even selling directly to the consumer. And they need to make sure the farmers are getting fair prices
Right.
and that they get paid on time. That's how you make dairying a real sustainable source of income for those families.
It feels like we've just, scratched the surface of this whole industry.
Oh, for sure.
But one thing's clear. Dairying has the potential to be a game changer.
It really does.
And not just in India, but in other places too. It's about so much more than just milk.
It is, yeah. It's about empowering people, giving them opportunities, and building a future that's good for everyone.
Well said.
This deep dive has definitely made me think about how connected it all is.
Me too, yeah.
We've seen how something as simple as a glass of milk can impact, poverty,
Right.
gender equality, the economy, and the environment.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It shows you that all of the choices we make
Right.
as consumers,
Yeah.
as policymakers,
As just regular people,
Yeah.
they have a real impact way beyond ourselves.
absolutely.
That's a great point to end on. As we wrap up our deep dive into the world of dairying in India, we hope you've learned something new about this amazing industry. Maybe you'll even think about it differently the next time you have a glass of milk.
Yeah, knowing all the work that went into it
Mhm.
and what it means for those families.
And maybe you're even thinking about some questions of your own. Like, could what they're doing in India work in other parts of the world that are facing those same challenges? Could dairying be part of the solution for sustainable development and, helping people escape poverty all over the globe?
Yeah.
We want you to keep thinking about these things
Yeah,
and exploring this fascinating world of food and agriculture.
it's an important conversation to have.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, stay curious.
I got milk.